everyone, I'm Becky and welcome to Becky's Breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about Nolan's Odyssey. There was a lot of really cool stuff from it and I have a lot of thoughts. So we have a little piece of paper to keep me on track because I have ADHD and will be here forever if I don't. And this will also be cut up into short form content if you would prefer to see this as shorts. So you can check that out on my channel. All right, part one. I haven't really seen anyone talking about this, and I think it's really cool. So this is the Nolan twist on the Odyssey. I'm sure other people have also realized it, but no one I follow has talked about it. So let's talk about the Nolan twist. And that is there are no gods. Now, in the original book, there are gods everywhere. We see discussions between different gods. Hermes comes down to help Odysseus with Circe and with Calypso. Zeus himself comes down to berate Odysseus's crew after they eat the sun cattle. And of course, there's Athena everywhere. She's talking to Odysseus. She helps Telemachus. She talks to a bunch of other people too. But in the movie, there are no gods. And I mean that literally. Even Athena, who does technically appear, is not actually Athena. And I think that for a few reasons. One is that she's only ever seen by Odysseus. In the book, she talks to Telemachus possibly even more than Odysseus. I don't know. It's been like 12 years since I've read the Odyssey, so give me a little grace there. But in the movie, she's only seen by Odysseus. There's also the fact that she is never depicted in armor, and that's generally how Athena is described when she's not in disguise. It's in armor. Instead, she's just wearing this simple priestess garb, and that's because if we were to put the Odyssey in chronological order, since it's told out of order, the first time Zendaya appears on screen is during the Siege of Troy, and she's this priestess who gets killed at the same time that someone else, another Greek warrior, cuts off Athena's head on a statue. And I think that is why she is what Athena looks like, because she's not actually the goddess. She doesn't appear like when they're in the Cyclops' cave and Odysseus is planning how to escape. She doesn't appear in times of turmoil or planning. She only ever appears when Odysseus is feeling guilty and contemplative. That's pretty much it. She's there for philosophy and to be a representation of his guilt. Because what happened in Troy was not okay. It was horrible. A bunch of people died. The Greeks killed just about everyone they came across, and it was Odysseus's plan with the horse that got them inside. And because of that, of course he feels a lot of guilt, and that's what Athena is. She's just a representation of his guilt, which is why she doesn't act like Athena, because she's not actually the goddess. Anyway, I thought that was a really cool twist, and I really, really liked that. It was a cool, different approach, even though I probably would have preferred the gods. So let me know what you guys think about that. Let's move on. Part two, changes I enjoyed. Number one, Sinon. Sinon is the character in the Greek mythology that basically tells the Trojans, this horse is a monument to Athena. Don't destroy it because then you'll make her mad. And the Trojans basically said, okay, then we'll take it inside and we'll use it to honor Athena instead, so she'll like us. And that's how they basically got the horse into the city. In the movie, Sinon is more than just that. He is also a young boy who came from Ithaca, so Odysseus knew him personally. And there's this cool relationship between him and Odysseus, and also between him and Antinous. And Antinous in this case is kind of like a draft dodger. He used his money to basically bribe Sinon to take his place in the war because he didn't want to go to war. And I think it's really cool, and it also adds a new layer to Antinous and helps show just how much of a coward and a traitor he is, because it's revealed in the underworld that he didn't actually give any money to Sinon's family, so he lied too. Other changes I like Eumaeus having a bigger role. Eumaeus was the swineherd, and in the movie it seems like he was more than just a slave that Odysseus knew. He was actually really close and kind of helped raise Odysseus a bit, which was cool. I did like that he had a bigger role. I like that Telemachus realized Odysseus's identity because Argus recognized him, which was a change that had to happen because in the original book, Athena pops up and basically strips Odysseus of his disguise and is like, hey, it's your dad. Look, he's right here. But that doesn't happen because Athena is guilt in the movie instead. So she can't appear to reveal his identity. So I think it was cute how they did it with the dog. And finally, the biggest thing I liked was actually the modern depiction of everything. Because the actual book does not depict Troy, the falling of Troy, as a bad thing. It does not really talk about all of the horrors that they do, with the exception of being Ajax the Lesser. And even then, that's kind of not because he did horrible things, but because of where he did them. For those who don't know, Ajax the Lesser ended up raping Cassandra in Athena's temple. And basically Athena said he needs to die, and the Greeks said no. So she and Poseidon sent a whole bunch of waves and storms against a bunch of Greek ships, and a bunch of people drowned because they wouldn't just kill Ajax. But even then, it's depicted as she's mad because it happened in her temple, not because of the rape. Because there was a bunch of rape and murder and pillaging and everything happening outside the temple. But they didn't really care. Troy was considered the enemy, so no one really saw that as a bad thing. But I actually really like how they depicted the falling of Troy as uncouth and kind of evil, and how they, ended up doing things that were not okay. And I like how they did that, though I'm sure that there are historians who are probably upset by the modern lens on everything. But I actually really liked it. Right, part 2, changes that worked. We skipped Lotus, the Lotus Eaters, and Aeolus, the king who gave them the wind bag. I'm okay with skipping both of these. What they really mostly did was show how inept and stupid Odysseus' crew is, and we get examples of them kind of being like that later, mostly with them eating the sun cow. They do end up looking better. The crew as a whole looks better throughout the entire adventure, just due to the changes in the plot. So they don't look as stupid, but I was okay with skipping that. Polyphemus. So one of Odysseus' most famous scenes is the Nobody scene, where he tricks Polyphemus into thinking his name is Nobody, so no one goes to Polyphemus' aid when he basically shouts that nobody blinded him, because people think, well, if nobody blinded you, then no one did anything. Why would we help? Because the truth is there were a lot of Cyclopses on that island. But they skipped over that completely for the horror of it, because with Polyphemus, and even with the Lastrygonian giants, the world is depicted as being much more horrifying. You live in this world with gods and monsters, and you can't stop them. The first thing the Cyclops does the minute Polyphemus walks in is he starts eating people immediately. There is no room for discussion. There is nothing. In the book, there is a full-on argument over them killing some of his sheep, and about Xenia, which is Zeus's law. I'll get to that later. So in the movie, they just jump straight into the horror. They make it a lot more terrifying. So the way they did it, I honestly didn't even realize that the whole Nobody scene was skipped until afterwards. So I was okay with that. We also skipped over Nestor. So one of the people Telemachus visits is this guy named Nestor, who also fought at Troy. And you know what? I'm okay with skipping Nestor, even if it does kind of stop giving Telemachus a friend, because he becomes friends with Nestor's son. Because Nestor's kind of a blowhard, and it's not really that important to the plot. And it gave us more time with Menelaus and Helen, and they were, I think that one, the actors did a great job, but two, it really helped set up a lot of things for Telemachus' character and give us parallels in the story. Also, we skipped over a lot of people in the underworld, which I'm mostly okay with, because in the original chapter, when Odysseus goes to the underworld, he talks to a lot of people, like people he fought with in the war, his mother, some other famous people who are just there because they're dead. And we really only talked to Sinon and to Agamemnon, which I was actually okay with, though I would have preferred if they included his mom, because I think that part was kind of that part felt important to me when I read it in the book. Maybe it's just because I love my own mom, but I feel like they should have included that. But I was mostly okay with skipping over everyone else in the underworld. We only have so much time. And we also skip the Phaeacians. So after he leaves Calypso's island, he washes up on the Phaeacian shore where they give him a boat and some other stuff. And then he sails to Ithaca. I was okay with skipping them because they didn't really add a lot more to the plot. It was just sort of an extra stop. So for the most part, yeah, I think most of these changes worked. All right. Part 4, changes I disliked. Mostly it was Nuke and Calypso and also Circe. So both Calypso and Circe are very beautiful, dominant, sexual women who use magic to get what they want. They're very unapologetic about it too. And neither of their characters were like this in the movie. Both of them were died down a lot. For Circe, instead of turning men into pigs because she genuinely believes they're pigs, it's presented as she turned them into pigs as a sort of like preemptive attack to make sure they couldn't sexually assault her. Circe is not this dominant, beautiful woman surrounded by other nymphs who is super powerful. She's presented as this lonely old woman who lives in the woods who is protecting herself and is scared. And that is what she did, and that is why she does what she does. I do think there were hints about the nymphs. There were a bunch of really big cats, and the gazelle that Odysseus killed turned into a person. So I'm guessing that the animals were nymphs and that they can change back and forth and that they were like in their animal forms because men were around and they were scared. But it's still Circe is still mostly presented as someone who does things out of fear, not necessarily because she's powerful and she could. And there was an aspect of fear. There was a fear element in the original book, but it's much more died down. It's less completely because of fear, and also because she believes that they deserve it and because she has the power to do that, so why not? And that's sort of how it's presented in the Odyssey. But in Nolan's movie, it's more just she's scared. And with Calypso, she was nuked even worse. So originally, Calypso is kind of, I don't want to say evil, but she's definitely, selfish. She's definitely doing things for her own reasons and a little diabolical. And she's keeping Odysseus because she wants him there. And she is kind of keeping him trapped, and he wants to leave. And in the movie, it's not that. I mean, for one, Circe and Calypso are died down because there's no goddesses, and because they are both technically considered goddesses. And because Nolan didn't want any goddesses, they both had to be neutered by a lot, I guess. So Circe is just this witch in the woods, and Calypso is basically just this lady who lives on an island. And that's what she's presented as. She's never acknowledged as trapped or anything like that. She just sort of lives there, and Odysseus just washed up one day. And then and she's presented as mostly benevolent, that she gives him the lotus to help him heal, but it messes with his memories. In the movie, she specifically tells him to stop eating the lotus, and I think they could have switched it. They could have kept some of her sinisterness and instead have Odysseus stop eating the lotus himself. Like maybe he's hiding it, maybe he's pretending to eat it, but she doesn't notice, and she's pressing to see if he remembers because she's worried that he'll leave if he does, and he'll just lie and say, no, I still don't remember anything. What are you talking about? And then we still cut away to the memories anyway to prove that he's lying. Like, there were ways they could have done this, and they could have kept Calypso's character. So I didn't like that. I felt like they were neutered. Calypso and Circe were too neutered, and it was an insult to their characters. So that is, I didn't like that. I think that it could have been done differently. Other things I didn't like. We completely skipped over Laertes, who is Odysseus' father, who is actually still alive, by the way. He just lives out in the woods, kind of. And we completely skipped over. He wasn't even a character in the movie, and I felt that was kind of weird and kind of mean to Odysseus personally, and even the rest of his family, too, even though Laertes does not really actively help Telemachus or Penelope, but I do think it was weird that they cut Laertes completely. They could have put him in there. There was also this weird thing where they called they kept calling it Zeus's law, even though there's a Greek word for it called xenia. I don't know why they didn't use the word. My guess is that maybe they were scared that it would draw attention to the fact that everyone's speaking English or something because it's a Greek word, but I think they could have used the Greek word xenia and been fine with it. I also would have liked to see the scene with the plow in the flashbacks. So originally, when Menelaus and Agamemnon come calling for help after Helen is taken, Odysseus plays crazy, and he pretends he's too crazy to go to war. He's like, no, I'm not a king, I'm a farmer. And he takes a plow and he starts plowing the fields. And this one guy, whose name I forget, he's like, I know how to prove that he's faking it. And then he takes baby Telemachus and puts him in front of the plow, which, one, insane. If the guy actually was crazy, he would have plowed over his own son. But Odysseus wasn't crazy, so he stopped, and then he went to war. And I would have liked that scene. I mean, they had flashback scenes anyway. I think that they could have thrown that in there instead of doing it the way they did, which was just this sort of weird discussion between Odysseus and Penelope instead about why he had to go to war. All right, part 5. Let's talk about the weird design. So I've heard complaints from historians about the boats and the armor, but I'm fine with those. I think that they looked okay. They looked realistic, and it's hard to pinpoint when the Odyssey takes place. If there was a belief that even though it was written in ancient Greek, it takes place in Mycenaean Greek, which was hundreds of years before ancient Greek. It was kind of like the predecessor to ancient Greece, kind of, I guess. So it's supposed to take place there, but there's also the fact that the fall of Troy directly leads to the rise of Rome, which takes place at the end of ancient Greece. And then there's also all the stuff with the Sea Peoples, which also is historically something at the end of ancient Greece. My point is that the Odyssey is a fictional story that takes place in a nebulous point of time. And I don't think that the actual accuracy matters that much, since we can't really pinpoint when it's supposed to take place. So I'm okay with the boats and the armor not really being accurate. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is the Laestrygonian armor, because it doesn't look like armor. They kind of look like 1500s medieval armor from Europe. It's a really weird design, and I'm showing pictures on the screen so you can see it. But personally, I don't even remember the Laestrygonians wearing armor in the book. I could be mistaken. There are times when I skip over lines by accident just for my ADHD. I remember reading Mockingjay, which is the last book in the Hunger Games series, and in the epilogue, there's one tiny throwaway line that has Annie holding a baby, and for years, until I read it the 5th or 6th time, I didn't realize Finnick and Annie had any kids, because it's literally just one line, so I ended up skipping past it by accident. So maybe the Laestrygonians do wear armor, and I'm just completely forgetful, and maybe even it's described as space armor, but I really don't think it is. So I would have just kept them out of armor. Scylla looked like a rock, kind of. Her necks looked very strange and bulky, and they had those weird lines on them, like curves on a rock. It was very strange, and you couldn't see the teeth or the faces. It was kind of how those, the worm from Dune, how it has all those teeth on the inside? It was kind of like that, and you could just see her necks reaching out. Also, Scylla moved very slowly, which is also weird. She's supposed to be too fast to see, and if she moved slow enough that if I was on that ship, I would have grabbed a sword and, started stabbing at her. It was just very strange for a design choice. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty much okay with most of the stuff. I really loved the music. I did some research afterwards and found they used no modern instruments, and they revitalized a bunch of old instruments we don't use anymore due to difficulty or just having instruments that produce better sound. And I think that was super cool and was a really good idea. I really, really loved that. Part 6, performances. Stands out for me was Anne and Lupita. They were phenomenal. Anne, her breakdowns were great. She definitely had the wit and the sort of mystique and the intelligence of Penelope. Lupita, especially her crazed act as Clytemnestra and her apologetic act as Helen, were really good. I really love them. Tom Holland did a great job as Telemachus. He fit really well into his role, as being young, as still learning, but still trying to be very righteous. He did a really good job with that. I feel like Matt Damon could have been a bit more conceited. Odysseus is supposed to be kind of insufferable, but I mostly blame that on the writing. He did a really good job for the lost and the guilt and that sort of things. As I mentioned before, I believe Calypso and Cersei were gutted, but they did really good with what they were given. They did a good job with that. Zendaya did a perfect job if she's the representative of guilt. If she's meant to actually be Athena, I think she and the writing did a bad job. But again, I believe she's meant to be representative of guilt. And if she was, she did a really good job with that. Pattinson did a surprisingly good job. I guess I'm just used to him being someone to root for, even if he doesn't always do things that are rooting for, like, Edward sneaking into Bella's bed at night to stare at her when she sleeps. That's presented as a good thing in the text, but it's not. But usually he plays a role where you're supposed to root for him, but he did a really good job at being an ass and a coward, and making you want for him to die. So I think he did a good job with that. Who else? I think that I really like the relationship between Eurylochus and Odysseus. You could really see that they cared for each other and that Eurylochus was pretty trusting at times for this man that he fought with. So I thought that was cool. I would have liked to see a bit more on their actual relationship, since it's mentioned not in the Odyssey itself, but in other texts that Eurylochus married Ctimene, who is Odysseus' sister, who for some reason isn't in the text, which is really weird. You think she would be in the palace helping out Penelope and stuff, but she's not really in there. Elliot Page also did a really good job with Sinon at making Sinon seem very trusting for Odysseus' plan and very betrayed when he found out that there was more to the plan that he wasn't told. Part 7, let's talk about conclusions. Overall, it was a very enjoyable movie. The pacing was really good. It did not feel like any parts were unnecessary or lingered too long. It just moved very smoothly into one part to the next, so it did a really good job. Even my mom enjoyed it, which is saying something, because my mom does not enjoy nonlinear storytelling. She really dislikes it, but she also felt like it was enjoyable, which to me is a very high approval from my mom for nonlinear storytelling. But it was definitely a very enjoyable movie. I really liked it, even if it left out a lot of stuff, and even if the gods weren't in it. I thought it was cool. I thought that the twist on Athena being guilt and the gods not actually appearing to humans was a very interesting take. And I did enjoy it in the moment, even if I do think I would rather prefer having the gods actually in there, but I did actually really like it. I do think it was really good. You get a solid 9 out of 10 from me, Nolan. Good job. So yeah, that's it for this part. I'm thinking I'll probably maybe reread the Odyssey and do another review, or maybe I'll compare this and Epic and we'll see which one's more accurate. So I'll probably come back with that, and then maybe do some reviews on other things like the Backrooms or Project Hail Mary. So yeah, if you like that and you want to see more, subscribe, and I'll see you later. Thanks everyone. Bye.